Last call for the people outside. We're going to start. Well, we'll just start then. Welcome to the 5th TDOS. 5 times in a row. I'm happy to see so many people for the first hours, because that's a new one. Because it's the 5th, we redesigned a special logo, and there it is. It is the TDOS logo. We're going to make more use of this in the coming years for other TDOSes. Again, we're at the Fontys University of Applied Science, and we're very happy to be here. And I especially want to thank all the sponsors and people that help in any way to make this event happening. So give them a big hand, please. And before we start with our keynote, I want to give our keynote speaker, John, a present, which is for all speakers. It's a TDOS mug with the TDOS logo on it, especially designed for the 5th anniversary. John, this one's for you. That's how you use a mug. People, have lots of fun. That is the left track. There's the right. Sorry, that's the left room, the right room. They are numbered because we used to use numbers. So the schedule will say left and right, but on the doors we wrote the numbers which correspond to the tracks. There's one bad news. We don't have internet yet, mainly because the patch points were not configured. So the help desk is looking into it, and I hope to be up in a couple of hours. So I will say, John, the floor is yours now.
Morning.
Hello, there we go.
Still screwed up here. Hold on. Try what? I'm sorry. Okay. This one here? Okay. Should I do that? 44. that better? Yeah.
What tasks we want to display contains other resolution buttons.
All right, so my name is John Willis, so I obviously have no clue on how to do presentations. I work for a company called OpsCode. I'm the VP of Services, and so just to give you a little bit about myself before we get started, I've been basically doing IT infrastructure for about 30 years. Say the last 5 years in the open source world, so I'm rather new to the open source world, but I dove into it. Actually, I spent a lot of time doing IT infrastructure, enterprise systems management with IBM, Tivoli-like products for quite a long time. And about 5 years I sold the company, and my wife asked me what I was going to do for a living, and I told her I didn't want to do anything. So I started blogging, and that was a good way to kind of get me into this mess I'm in right now. So, but anyway, if you look at, one tweet to describe who I am, right? How do you like that? When all you have is how everything looks like in IT infrastructure. I also do a couple of podcasts. I do one with a gentleman named Michael Cote. We're going to be giving a presentation together at Devops next week, the week after next, and for the IT management podcast guys. We have this kind of thing in the U.S. I don't know if you get over here. These two guys, they call them click and clack. They talk about cars all day long on the radio. So we're the click and clack of IT infrastructure. I also do DevopsCafe, so I've been doing that getting close to a year maybe, so that's been a lot of fun. And I also used to do a lot of talk about cloud, so, and I am also the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz in my off hours. So about 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation at Interop in New York, and they asked me to, what they do at Interop is they basically tell you the presentation you're supposed to give, right? So, and then they say, here's the presentation I want you to give. Like, okay, they give you the title and everything. And then you just go ahead and do whatever you want anyway, but you maintain that title, right? So, but the thing is that, and it was actually a pretty good title this time, right? So, the Agile Enterprise, Cloud, and DevOps. And so, so that's what I'm going to give here today, is a little bit of a modified version of what I gave over there, which I think is timely. And the map there is kind of describe something that I think we're in right now. It's kind of plate tectonics, right? We're in this what people have called like the Cambrian Explosion. I did a presentation last year. I called it the Cambrian Cloud Explosion, and I've heard other people call it like it's another industrial revolution. Last year I was evangelist for Canonical, their cloud, basically a cloud evangelist for Canonical for their product called UEC, the Ubuntu Enterprise Cloud. And as I go around talking to people, I keep everybody getting the same theme of like, this is a little bit different than it's been. And like I said, I've been doing this 30 years, and I've seen some kind of really big shifts in terms of what technology and things are happening. And I think that this one's for real. You know, I was talking to Ari this morning, if you gentlemen don't know Ari. I was talking about like, this is so exciting for me, what's going on right now. He works for Puppet Labs, and or works with Puppet Labs, I don't know. And it's so exciting right now that like everything that IBM has been talking about, or companies have been wanting in IT, is like actually looking like it's starting to happen. Right? The technology is finally in a place where it actually makes sense for some of these spectacular things. So I'm going to kind of walk through some of my observations of this. So last year when I did a keynote for a NoSQL East conference, and I started with this Cambrian Explosion, and the first thing I kind of found is this, Herbert Simon, about 40 years ago, he was talking about AI, and he was doing a lot of interesting things. He won a Turing Award, he also won a Nobel Prize in economics. But the most important thing he was talking about is this kind of hierarchy theory, componentization. And you know, he has this kind of quote here, the rate of evolution of any system is dependent upon the organization of its subsystems. But, and I think that's kind of where we're at right now. There's such great componentization available. And if you just take cloud, for example, and I'll talk a little bit more about cloud, of being one of those kind of fabric pieces that puts us in a place to do really interesting stuff. So one of the things he talks about is this parable of Hora and Tempest. And they're two clockmakers, watchmakers, and they're both really good, right? And they both get the same amount of business. People pretty much flip a coin, decide which one they're going to go to get their new watch, right? But one of them does terribly well. Hora, let's say, does really well, and Tempest does horribly, really bad, right? And so the thing is that Tempest, there's like 1,000 components making a watch, right? And every time Tempest gets a phone call, he has to drop the watch, spills out into the original 1,000 pieces, picks up the call and gets another order, and starts back over. Now, Hora, on the other hand, is a little bit clever. He built like 10 different components pre-built of each of those. And so every time he'd get a call, he'd put down that 1/10 of the whole infrastructure, and it would basically go ahead and fall apart, but he'd have like whatever else he was done with already, right? Probably not too clever either, but the point is there was a big difference in the way he was doing his work, and to just analyze it from an outside perspective, it didn't seem like what was the difference? They were both great, everybody loved them, right? So the message here, or maybe the takeaway of that parable to today, is that that we've always been burdened in technology and in our space of technology changes, evolution, revolution. We're always seeing the next greatest thing. We're always seeing new products that are facing us, right? And you know, the fluctuation of demand of what people want, what the business owners want, right? So if you kind of apply that to Horus and Tempest, right, I would say that there are people today building infrastructure that are on a ship going left, and there are people building infrastructure on a ship going right. And like the old legacy IT infrastructure are Tempest, right? They're you know, every time they get hit with this wave of new changes, they either can't pick up the phone, right? Or if they do pick up the phone, everything goes to hell, right? So, and then we're seeing these new infrastructures that are like Horus, that are building on componentry, right? And so what is some of this componentry? So let's talk about another person here. I figured I'd be a little high level today. I'll actually get a little more down in the weeds in a little bit, but I figure since it's a keynote, I actually had to sound like I'm smart. This is another gentleman called Hal Varian. Anybody know who this guy is? Good, you shouldn't. He's actually the chief economist for Google. Now, that's pretty cool, right? A chief economist for a company, right? So, but the thing is there's a video of him in 2009, and he talks about we're in this period of combinatorial innovation. And these periods have happened before. They happened when people were putting together rifles in the late 1800s. They happened with the transistors. And now we're in this new period of combinatorial innovation. And the difference this time is that our components are abstract and fault tolerant, right? Our components are bits. They're really easy to reproduce, right? We can make 5, we can make 10. I can give you 10, I can give you 30, right? This is, again, the Cambrian Explosion idea, that why it's a little bit different this time. Integrated network accessible services, we all know that, right? And then unlimited infrastructure, right? And you know, like, if you hear some of these stories of companies today, like within the last 3 to 5 years, right, there has been a fundamental change. You take, for example, Farmville, right? Which everybody's heard of Farmville, right? It's a silly, stupid game. It's a game. They're a gaming company. And they're owned by, Farmville is a game that's owned by a company called Zynga. Zynga today is basically generating 1,000 servers a week, right? You know, you can say there has to be a brick wall somewhere on it, and by the way, they do that on Amazon's cloud. But you can say there's a brick wall and there has to be, you know, a year ago I used to have to defend myself when I said unlimited infrastructure, and they'd say, John, it can't be unlimited. There has to be a physical. Like, okay, well, these guys at 1,000 a week are not finding that wall, right? So I wanted to put this in perspective of what some of this stuff means to me. There's a great presentation coming on after this one on DevOps. If you're interested in anything I talk about DevOps, you probably want to stick around for that one. I'm hearing a lot of things, or you probably hear things. How many people have heard of DevOps? Okay, just actually a minority, right? So there's some kind of underlying things or definitions. Like you hear people talk about Agile Infrastructure or Agile Operations and DevOps. And I'll kind of go through what I think. There's really no definition of these things. It's whatever the speaker says they are, you know, and it's whether you believe them or not. So I'll tell you what I think these things mean to me and what's going on and why it matters, right? So Agile Infrastructure to me is operating at cloud scale. I was in Seattle. My headquarters is in Seattle. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. But I was up there about a month ago, and I saw Werner Vogels, who's the CTO of Amazon, right? Amazon's cloud and all that good stuff. And it was kind of interesting. Normally he's talking about how great we are cloud, blah, how great we are cloud, blah. But this one he happened to be talking about the history of their infrastructure. So he actually went through like the different changes that they went through at Amazon. And fortunately, I actually have a lot of people in my company actually worked at Amazon, right? So I've got kind of really two good sides of the story. You talk about how they started out as kind of a stack-based, you know, we don't know, just web stack. And then they decided that like that they were growing too fast, right? And this is a common theme, right? Google ran into this. A lot of companies figure out real quick, this kind of ship's going to the left. They figure out that they're not going to succeed. I always say they do the math, right? They actually look and say, you know what? At this point, if we stay the way we are, we're just not going to be able to manage this, right? And so they went from like kind of a web stack to an SOA-based architecture. They did the math. They had to change it again. They went to what they called web scale, and obviously now they're at cloud scale, right? And so what does cloud scale mean? It means things like what Zynga's doing, 1,000, being able to generate 1,000 in a week, right? Being able to, there's a great story of this company called Animoto. It's pretty, it's an old story in the cloud world, but they're a company that went from basically about a couple of hundred or 50 instances on Amazon to 5,000 in 1 week. They went from like 35,000 users to like 750,000 users in a week, right? Right. So that's cloud scale, right? And then there's what I call ephemeral infrastructure, or I call it is ephemeral infrastructure, and that is that like instead of thinking about architectures in 3, 5, 10-year plans, people are able to kind of step outside of the box. They're on that ship going left, right? And they're able to think about infrastructure in matter of hours, like disposable infrastructure. Build it, toss it away. Build 4. If you're not sure one's going to work, if you're not sure like this way or that way, build them both and test them both, right? There's a company I worked with called Sonyan, and they actually, this is kind of interesting, at the end of every 2-week sprint, when they push and develop the new base of their code, they actually rebuild the infrastructure at the same time, right? Isn't that cool? Right, so, and there's nothing stale, there's no bit rot, right? There's a gentleman called Randy Bias. He owns a company called Cloud Scaling. Very interesting. They build Google-like clouds for anybody, right? So they figured out how to do these pod-based clouds, shipping container. They don't really actually give you shipping containers, but the same concept, right? And he calls it frictionless infrastructure or frictionless IT, right? And this is again, I'm going back to what I think Agile infrastructure means. It means not having to deal with people to get resources. Let me say that again. Not having to deal with people to get resources. Isn't that brilliant, right? Self-service operations. Like, I need a resource, I get it. I turn on the lights in this room, I get it. I go to do a presentation on my computer, I don't get it. So, couldn't resist. Agile Operations. This is kind of, so what Agile Infrastructure, Agile Operations. So what Agile Operations means to me is this idea of products, not projects. And actually Amazon, Google, they've kind of been doing this for a little while, right? The Amazon's classic for this. They build teams based on the product. And the product is a cross-functional team of sysadmins, testers, developers, everybody that you need to create that product, right? And then this is also, when we talk about agile methodologies, the idea that you can have this walk-on, walk-off project, right? And Agile Operations is one where if somebody dies, it matters, but it doesn't matter, right? Right, because everything they've done, test-driven behavior, all the things that are in the infrastructure itself are kind of, walk on, walk off, really, right? Imagine that. And I'll talk about an interesting company in a little bit. I've got a little bit like case studies at the end. A velocity of innovation. I love this idea. I don't know, Damon Edwards, from DTO Solutions, we do this DevopsCafe together, and he gave a presentation recently. He talked about just the velocity of innovation, right? And how quick do you get from the aha to the ka-ching, right? How quick do you get from the idea to actually doing some business value in your company? And then continuous delivery. I know that Patrick and Chris are probably going to talk a little about that in their DevOps presentation, so I won't steal any thunder there. But Jez Humble of ThoughtWorks, right? So he has a whole book on continuous delivery, right? We hear these people talking about doing updates to production 50 times a day, 20 times a day, right? This idea that we've completely redesigned or redefined the definition of what a QA person means. That's very interesting. And last but not least is this idea I love. I heard this at Devops in Hamburg for the first time. This idea of what we would call an enterprise lean startup. And this might be in the enterprise where the large enterprise companies, the stodgy right ship companies who possibly can't change everything at a snap of a finger, might think about like treating a treating a project like a product that is kind of a VC internally funded, like they're funding a team, put it together and build it, right? Yeah, brilliant idea, right? So DevOps, right? So DevOps, again, I'll let Patrick and Chris talk a little bit more about this, maybe a little bit where it came from and what to talk about. But it's that kind of cat and dog fight that we've had for years between operations and developers. And so why should you care about DevOps? Short answer, it makes your business more agile, right? Right, and I'll show you what the AntiPattern is to this in a second. But coming from the dog, ruh-roh, it's about the business, Rupert, right? Scooby-Doo, anybody? Scooby-Doo? Okay, good. So my boss, the founder of OpsCode, Adam Jacob, he gave a presentation at Velocity. It was pretty cool. And he says flat out, DevOps is a cultural and professional movement, period. That's it, right? It's not a product. If somebody tells you that they have a DevOps product, or there's a DevOps certification, or they are DevOps or whatever, they're full of crap, right? Because, in fact, don't deal with them, right? Because they're really just trying to piggyback. They're actually trying to corrupt. We're all trying to piggyback DevOps, let's be honest. But they're trying to corrupt what it really is, right? Because there are quite a few people, myself included, that actually care about, I need to make money, but I do care about how this industry works. The AntiPattern is this classic wall of confusion. I think Andrew Schaefer might be the original author of this. Not sure. Could be Patrick, Andrew, you? I don't know. Again, it's that brick wall that's in between I have a great idea till I actually make money, right? And classically, the AntiPattern there's just been this bad handoff or this throw over the wall between developer and operations, right? And so what, fundamentally, DevOps should be about how do we smash that wall, right? And here again, I think Patrick and Chris will have some great ideas about what to do there, how to blow up that wall. Right? Yeah, well, it's always that. We can make we could have the illusion that the wall's not there if we're all drunk, right? So like I said earlier, I think DevOps is about velocity. I like this. I got this from, if you hadn't caught a theme here, I steal themes from everybody. From Damon Edwards of Detail Solution, right? And to me, this, like, that DevOps is about velocity. And, so the thing is, like, speed without direction is just speed, right? But speed with direction is velocity, right? So that's the key here, right? We're getting to a point, we know how to get there, and we want to get there fast. What are the things that get in our way? Let's get rid of those things. All right, so there's been this acronym that has come up, CAMS. Me and Damon Edwards, we kind of do that on a blog podcast. What happened was, early this year there was velocity in the US, and then on Friday there was a DevOps day at the end of that, and it was brilliant. I mean, it was, for people who are passionate about what I'm talking about now, it was like 3 days of really, really smart people presenting and talking about their operational infrastructure, web operations, all this really cool stuff. And then on Friday, after all that, like, if you've ever been to Velocity, I mean, it's like writer's cramp, right? I mean, all you're doing is taking notes. You're just listening to brilliant people. And then on Friday, we have this DevOps day, and everybody's like as passionate and not tired and like having fun. And so the next week, me and Damon in our podcast, we normally interview people. We just decided to like try to figure out what the hell happened, because it was pretty amazing, right? As you know, geeks like us would think, right? So we actually brainstormed, and we kind of came up to like, what did we hear last week? And we came up with this CAMS, culture, automation, measurement, and sharing, right? So talk about culture. What's your culture? I love this slide. It's such a picture of what culture means in one company versus the other, right? You have the wire closet, the tale of two wire closets, right? And the wire closet on the left, really, you can tell the culture there. Like, they don't really give a rip who comes next, who's got to deal with it. It's a get in, get out mentality. You can tell there's not so much of a team. And on the right, maybe they're a little crazy, right? But they clearly have, like, they worry about who's coming there next. And it's that idea that, I said earlier that, that if you're Agile Operations, right, that you should be able to have this kind of walk-off, walk-on mentality, right? And clearly that would be the wire closet on the right in this case. So when we talk about culture, I did a lightning talk at the DevOps Hamburg, and so I did a little lightning talk on culture. So this next run of slides is going to be somewhat of that, where I talk about leadership, behavior, communications, passion, and get this, having fun what we do, right? So leadership, right, is, there's kind of the three management styles, right? There's the guy who doesn't know how bad he is. There's the guy who knows how bad he is, but he doesn't have a clue how to change it. And there's the guy or person who just doesn't give a shit, right? So what's your leadership, right? We talk about culture. What's the leadership in the organization? I mean, this is all part of DevOps. I think there's an opportunity, like, for some consulting companies to actually go in and assess this first, right? To figure out, like, does your leader have a line of sight to this? Does the leader even give a shit? There's a gentleman named Jody Mulkey. He's the CIO of a company called Shopzilla, right? They're about 10,000 servers, instances they run on it. They're a very, very successful company. And he's the CIO. And he shows up at these grassroots DevOps things, right? Right? And I asked him one time, I'm like, why are you always, you're a big shot, right? And, yeah. No, he's actually shorter than me, but the thing is, he says, because I'm pretty passionate about, like, what we're doing here. He's pretty proud of what they're doing in terms of what they consider a cultural movement, and he wants people to hear what he's doing so that they want to come work there, right? So that that's, I mean, if make me king for a day in I don't say your company, but your company, like, I'd find a Jody Mulkey to run it, right? So another form of kind of leadership is, like, what's in the ranks, right? And I call this the castle style of leadership, right? And there's the developers are, like, on the constant quest of Holy Grail, right? And the operations are the guys who are constantly taunting them, right? Like, we've already got one, right? So so this is the, your classic style of the kind of anti-pattern, right? Whereas what I see a lot now when I talk to people that are trying to think about DevOps as, how do we apply, what are we doing wrong, how can we get the aha to ka-ching, there's these models, like people ask me, John, okay, you talk a good game about culture, how do I fix it? And I say, if I knew that, I'd be out on a boat fishing because I'd be so freaking rich. I wouldn't be here right now. But I can tell you what I see people doing right. And one of them is this kind of what I call the homeless model, right? And that is where they'll say, take a developer that has a lot of development chops and put that person in operations. Or take somebody with operation chops and put that person in development. Right? In fact, there's a company out of Atlanta that does really well. They actually took this guy with 10 years of ops experience, and they basically put him in kind of dotted line to the CIO in charge of the developers. And he just told the developers, like, these are going to be the directories. These are going to be the, and like they really didn't care. They cared, but when it was all said and done, they didn't really care. And now they are actually running like pretty swimmingly, if you will. Behavior, right? I was thinking about this when I was putting my presentation together for the DevOps Lightning Talk. I was thinking like how simple is it to demand respect in an organization, right? I mean, and if you've got a leader that doesn't see that, like where I work, I expect everybody to respect me, and I expect that everybody that works with me demands that I respect them, right? It's like, what did you learn in kindergarten? But how many people work in a place where everybody doesn't respect each other? Raise your hands. Come on now. All right. Yeah. Come on now. I'm kidding. All right. So, a couple more high-level things. The behavior of, what are your enemies? This, again, we're on DevOps culture. In a startup, it's pretty easy, right? Your enemy is usually some type of competitor, or if you're an open source startup, it's some proprietary version of that, right? You kind of have that combined forces of, but as you get larger and bigger, the enemies start becoming the dopes down the hall. Those guys, they always come in late. Every time you ask them to do something, so back to Jody Mulkey, CIO of Shopzilla, I love, he says, he says, when we go into the war room, and he means developers and operations, the problem is the enemy. Like, how brilliant is that, right? Behavior, fearless culture, right? So, again, those ships going to the left, they basically, do they promote the ability to fail, right? Are you in a company where failure is acceptable, right? Because how do you get better in anything? The first diver that stands on a diving board doesn't get a double flip run the very first time. But in IT, we have this stupid idea that you should never fail. My God, you fail. I mean, the greatest thing that ever happened to me is I actually one time in a large data center, actually I'll say it, JP Morgan Chase, I hit the red button. I did. I hit the red button. Fortunately, the halon didn't dump. There was some other mechanism that was had to happen again, but man, I never hit I never hit a damn red button again in my life. I never did a weird one. I mean, when I walked into rooms, I went like this around them, right? I stayed 20 feet away from them, right? So, I love this. Chris Reed used to work for ThoughtWorks. He now works for DRW. He gave a presentation. Oh, actually, I was in London, and we were doing this podcast with him. And he talked about the smell test. I love this. If there's somebody in your organization and you question their value, your company has failed the smell test, right? Isn't that cool, right? I mean, that means you got a communication problem, right? Somebody's not letting you know their value, or they're not letting you, it doesn't matter. Also, I'll attribute this to Chris Reed. He talks about the shaman in an organization, the people that can tell you the backstory, the people that you can go to and say, when you're just about to rip all this code out because you're pretty certain that nobody else uses it, right? And boy, when you do, all hell breaks loose because there's something that cross connects that came from nowhere, and on Tuesdays when it rains, it definitely, somebody runs it, right? But the shaman comes in and he tells you, oh, no, there's a whole, or there's the stuff there that people religiously follow, and you ask everybody, like, why do we do that? And they're like, I don't know, something happened with JBoss 4 years ago, and geez Louise, right? So it's the shaman that can tell you, like, tell us. And then finishing out kind of a little bit of the culture is the passion of what you do. Like, are you a person that like touches metal strings on a wood stick? Are you the greatest blues guitar player ever played in the existence of mankind? Last but not least of the culture, actually second to last, is I tell this to the DevOps folks, right? So so if you're thinking like this guy's full of crap, you just think he's talking about some new thing that I got to learn, and we've been hearing this cloud thing, now I got to hear this DevOps thing. The thing is, as people are into DevOps, for those of you who raised your hand in DevOps, it's like before we take over the ship, let's understand what all the buttons do and how it works, right? And so let's not let our enthusiasm get masked for arrogance, right? And so I think that's an important thing for people who are passionate about anything, really, right? But clearly in the DevOps. And then lastly, like one of the things that the startups have that the enterprises typically don't have is having fun. I went to Shopzilla's about 3 months ago. I was at Shopzilla's headquarters in San Francisco, and it's like fun there. I mean, they got like an atrium with a basketball court. They've got old Pac-Man games. They got booze, they got food, it's just toys all over the place. It's just fun. Why can't we do that in the enterprise? Why can't we have fun? All right, so where's the cloud part of this whole thing, right? So what does cloud have to do with all this Cambrian Explosion, DevOps, right? Agile Infrastructure, right? So there's a children's story called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, right? And they made it into a movie, right? And I think it's a great story for cloud computing, right? So this town, chew it and swallow, right? It gets weather 3 times a day. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They get like tremendously great food. They get meatballs and spaghetti, and they get pizza, and it's raining beer, if you like, in your fantasy, right? Belgian beer. I said that last year, and I got yelled at. Belgian beer, German beer, I don't know. And that's great, except when you have too many resources, what happens, right? It gets really messy, especially when you start getting kind of cloud scale resources, right? So that's fine until the meatball hits the fan, right? So I had to throw this in. So, but the point is that, like, being able to get 1,000 servers a week, or going from 100 servers to 5,000 in a week, or in fact, I was at a large media company recently, and they probably had like 4,000 servers for, I don't know, 3-4 years. Their growth has not been, in terms of their server infrastructure, been pretty stable. And they've been playing around with Amazon's cloud for some pet projects. And one of the ones they did was for the US election day. So they decided they'd kind of put in this auto-scaling infrastructure for the election day, because they knew it was going to be kind of, it was going to take a lot of processing and all that. And they've obviously had some really bad fails in the past because of scaling on, on trying to understand the amount of resources that they need to be able to just project and keep up with the traffic. And so they got ahead, and what he found out was interesting. They did one, they did another one. They tried that one, so they prototyped that one during the summer. And then since then have got a little bit of a taste for the cloud. And what's interesting, they told me, is that like what scared the hell out of them is that they were seeing these one-off projects that would have infrastructure with 30 to 40% of the size of their current infrastructure. Just one project, right? One-off would have like 2,000 servers, right? And so they was like, okay, we need to rethink everything. We need to think in kind of an order of magnitude now. Tens become hundreds, hundreds become thousands, thousands become hundreds, thousands, millions, right? So, and I think that's the thing where we talk about cloud and infrastructure, we better be ready for it. So that means, like, okay, like if you don't have culture, back to CAMS, culture, automation, measurement, and sharing, if you don't have culture, don't bother doing anything, really, honestly. I mean, shut the door, close up the business, sell shoes for a living, unless that's what you already do, then do something else. But automation, right? So, right. So, but if you have process, right, culture, like process, right, behavior, automation becomes really, really, really interesting, right? And why? Because infrastructure is hard. I'm sorry, folks. I'll disagree with you. I won't even ask you. I won't take a debate. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. Doing fully automated infrastructure is very hard. Doing orchestration, provisioning, configuration management, source, release management, monitoring on top of that, doing some autonomics, automation, right? That's not stuff that comes right out of the box, right? You don't get it with the cloud. I think it's funny how a lot of people come to a cloud presentation and they'll see something like configuration management, so like, what the cloud does that? Like, no, it actually doesn't, And, the cloud doesn't just open up a box with like 30 sysadmins and network administrators, right? They don't come, and you'd be amazed how many people think, really smart people, think that they get the cloud and they're sitting around for a year going, where are all those guys? How come they're not doing anything, right? I'm kind of joking there, but not really, right? Right, so I have this kind of what do developers want out of automation, right? They want it to be easy. They want self-service operations. Why in the enterprise are lots of pocket groups and companies going out to the cloud? And I'll say it's because they don't have to deal with people, right? So they can get what they want through an API call, right? They can pull out their credit card. I think the other thing is, I think that, we'll talk a little bit about infrastructure as code in a little bit. I think that developers like the idea of treating their infrastructure like code. And we'll talk more about that. Minimize bottlenecks. So what do operations want out of this deal? So I'm an ops guy. I've been doing it 30 years, right? Like I say that we're like cicadas, right? But our hibernation period is like 10 years, not 17, right? And every 10 years, the world gets so mucked up from an IT infrastructure perspective. Like things just get crazy and all sorts of crazy stuff come out. That we wake up and we look around and we start like, okay guys, come on. We gotta go ahead and fix all this crap. And so that's what we're in right now, right? The Cambrian Explosion, cloud, DevOps, automated infrastructure, right? Stuff that gets pretty exciting. But at the end of the day, we just want to have fun, right? That's all I want. So it's my presentation, so I get to say this. So operations. How many people have seen this book called Web Operations? Not many. If you think everything I'm talking about is a bunch of crap, then don't buy this book. If you're even slightly interested in anything I'm talking about, then you should race out and get this book because it's awesome. It's how many people heard of Beautiful Code book by O'Reilly? Right, yeah, so Tim O'Reilly asked John Allspar and Jesse Robbins to basically do a beautiful code where get top people in the industry to write a chapter about web operations. And it's a great book, right? And so, what operations needs to do is be more saying yes instead of no, not be the get out of here, go read the doc, get lost. It's a different attitude. Automate everything. So, automate your integration, continuous integration, build your deployment, continuous delivery, orchestration, right? Anything you get your hands on. This idea of infrastructure as code, right? Treat your infrastructure the same way you treat your applications. Code it. Make it repeatable. Possibly apply test cases to it. Unit testing if possible, right? Lots of cool stuff when you start coding your infrastructure. Like I talked about that Sonyan. The reason they can actually, at the end of each 2 weeks, sprint is the same repository that their code base is the same repository that their source code that defines their infrastructure, right? So version control, process control, application level control, all of that becomes possible with infrastructure as code. And a lot of times people will ask hey, what's the difference between infrastructure code? Why is it so cool now? Isn't it just a new fancy name on something we've been doing for years? And the answer is yes and no. The yes is there's a guy named Bob in probably every company. Whether he's named Bob or not, he's named Bob to me. And he's got a directory called Bob's stuff. And in that subdirectory, he's got a directory of Bob's scripts. And Bob's scripts basically do everything. They're tremendously interesting. They have long, in fact, they can do 50 lines of code in this much space, right? And they're really spectacular. But the problem is when Bob goes on vacation, or God forbid Bob dies, right? All hell goes to, forget about it. So that's the yes. The no is we don't have any Bobs with infrastructure as code. Everybody's Bob, right? And like it's shareable. It's like I can look at the definition of an infrastructure of how a Tomcat or a Java stack gets deployed because it's pretty readable and it might be documented. And it might even have somebody might have been nice enough to build a workflow around it, right? And all the pieces might be in the same directory structure. And it's not like Bob/hidden, if you find it, I'll kill you directory for configuration files, right? Is anybody having fun yet? It's too early. So I'll do this one too as infrastructure code. This is Adam Jacob. He did one of the chapters in the web operations book. It's a tornado hits your data center. So and he talks about, okay, it's tongue in cheek, but it kind of illustrates infrastructure as code. So a tornado hits your data center. You're watching a movie at home. So you put down your pause the movie. You put down your popcorn. You sign into your cloud provider. You download your offsite backups. You provision and configure and integrate your new servers, right? Because they're cloud servers. Oops, don't forget to put the hit by tornado on the screen just in case people need to know. We'll be back shortly. You restore the customer and application data. You remove that page that we've been hit by the tornado, and you unpause your movie and hope your popcorn's still warm, right? This is in that web operations book, chapter 5. But in a cloudy world, this is Adam says, the primary constraint is the time it takes to restore your application data, not your infrastructure. So configuration management, right? This is near and dear to my heart. All right, so the other thing I talk about, like, so people say the cloud, don't I get that with the cloud? No, what you get with the cloud in most cases, if you go into Amazon, or what people refer to as infrastructure as code, you get provisioning. That's what most clouds give you. Now, there are forms of clouds that give you deeper dives, but you pay a price for that. But the point is, most clouds give you automated provisioning. You ask for resources, you get them. I say that cloudy configuration management in the cloud, or cloudy configuration management, might include virtualization, might even actually, I came up with this idea of cloudy world in that, like, most places are not just cloud. They're not just virtualization, and by the way, a lot of bare metal still exists. That's a cloudy world, right? And so I say that configuration management today is made up of these three pieces. And so just to walk you through, provisioning is pretty simple, right? I want to build a service. Let's say it's a LAMP stack. And what I do with provisioning is I ask for 6 resources. I get 6 resources. I have no clue from a meta point of view of what they are. Now, they may be pre-baked images. They may not. They might be just enough operating system, right? They all might be the same exact image, which is actually what I prefer. But it doesn't matter. They're 6 screen blobs. What part 2 of 3 is configuration management, which is, I think products like CF Engine, Puppet, and Chef are part of this infrastructure as code. I think more so Puppet and Chef. Sorry for you CF Engine folk. But infrastructure as code, and it's this desired state componentry. And that is that I want those 6 blobs to become desired state components, right? So I want one to be a load balancer. The web servers, right? You get the point, right? But what's missing here? Anybody? Bueller? No. Wait, nobody got that one? Or it just wasn't funny? I don't know. They're not connected, right? Hey, there we go. How did they? I usually give a free cup of coffee for that, but I think coffee's pretty pricey here. So
Coffee's back.
Yeah, there you go. So I got a good mug though. Thank you, Jim. It's the how do I connect them. What I really want, one of the things that was funny when I was a cloud evangelist with Canonical, I'd go around talking about the cloud, and I'd run into these enterprises, right? We were always trying to sell, Canonical is, UEC is actually eucalyptus under the covers, right? If you haven't heard, eucalyptus is an open source private cloud. I would put a double quotes around open source, but that's another discussion. But I'd run into these developers, and honestly, they'd say to me, John, cloud schmoud. They said, what I want is, I've got an app, and I want to put that app in a QA environment, or a development environment, or a test environment, and I don't want to touch anything else but the app, right? I just want the infrastructure. Can you automate that for me, right? And I think that's kind of what I consider a little bit of the last mile of creation management is that, yeah, I can automatically provision 6 green instances, either VMware, cloud, even bare metal if I've got the hardware set up, right? And I can do configuration management like desire state componentry. I think, like I said, there's some great open source products to do that. But what I really want also is I don't want to go in and do one-off scripts and configuration and change, right? 1 minute? Oh, I thought I had an hour. Okay, well that's going to make this very difficult. I'm going to skip a couple of slides then. So what I want to do is I want to get from this kind of provisioning, configuration, to integration, right? So I want this whole piece. I think there's Andrew Shaver talked about infrastructure as data, and I'm not going to have time for this, but this idea of kind of letting the data drive your infrastructure. So if you buy into infrastructure as code, that's great, but how about now starting to separate the logic from the data, right? So that you start defining kind of data objects to say and produce your infrastructure. It gets pretty interesting. Again, I don't have time to tell you that, so I'm going to skip to the last couple of parts of this presentation. And measurement, if you know me, I never do things on time, so you're going to have to drag me out. I'm going to probably take 2 more minutes. The measurement, right, CAMs, culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. Measure everything. I think we're in a world now, data's cheap, the analytics tool, the old paradigm of only measure what you think you know. Baloney. We don't know what we need to know. Right? The opportunity now is to capture everything. Shopzilla dumps 85,000 metrics per second into a Cassandra database. Right? Measure everything. The 5 whys, continuous improvement, walk down the chain, ask the question, ask the question, ask the question, ask the question, right? In this case is we lost the war, why did we lose the war? Ultimately is we didn't have enough nails, right? So fix that problem. Put that, automate it. Old school is still cool, right? I've been doing this 30 years. I started out the change management, incident management on mainframes. Like we were doing it really well back then, right? We need to do it really well now, right? Correlating change to incident, very important. Tracking TTR, time to repair, time to detect, very important. Last but not least, sharing, right? Sharing, thinking that not telling people what you're doing is cool, or it's like, oh, we can't tell you what we do at our shop. Like, we're like really smart, and if you found out, then you'd be as smart as us, right? That's not the DevOps way. The DevOps way is show up and tell everybody what you're doing, and chances are other people are doing the same thing you're doing, and they'll tell you all the things that you need to know so you don't make mistakes, right? So share your metrics. Tell people about what you're doing. Share your ideas. If your CIO shows up at DevOps meetings, that's pretty damn cool, right? Be bold, and mighty forces will come to your aid. I was going to do some case studies, but again, I don't have time. I talked about some of these, Sonia and Shopzilla. There's a video on, in fact, I'll go to, you have homework, by the way, so just to let you know. I think you should read web, if again, any of this was interesting. If it wasn't, who cares? But if it was, definitely read Web Operations. There's actually a chapter in there by Eric Ries called Lean Startup, which is brilliant. On my DevopsCafe, there's a video with a company called Kaching. I think it's episode 14. If you're going to read this Lean Startup chapter, watch the Kaching video first, and then read the Lean Startup. It will blow your mind. I mean, honestly, if it doesn't blow your mind, I will. John@opsco.com. Ship you something, a coffee mug or something. Honestly, if you do those 2 things, I promise you, and you send me an email that it didn't blow your mind, I will send you like we don't even have OpsCode coffee cups, but I'll make them. And then continuous deployment, Jez Humble. If you're not into the Scrum, Kanban, you should learn it. Test-driven development, good stuff. I'm done. Thank you. Sure, I'll post them up this afternoon on slideshare.net. It'll be under the ops code. Just search ops code, and then there's a whole set of all slides there. Thanks. Sure.